Hey everyone, my name's Devin. I'm a 4th year medical student at Imperial College London. Welcome to my channel. If you're new here, make sure you smash that subscribe button down below. So, iPad Air 2020. I have it, but first, let's unbox it. And yes, it really does come with a power brick. The iPad is one of the best assets that you can have in university, and with the new iPad Air costing £579 or $599 and looking almost exactly like the iPad Pro, which costs £779 or $799, almost £200 more, right? And it's now even got USB-C, which the Macs and the iPad Pro and literally every other device apart from the iPhones have had for years, and they've even brought the 2nd generation Apple Pencil down, which charges and connects which is so much better than the old lollipop charging that they used to have. And so you're probably wondering, should I even look at the iPad Pro? Should I even consider it? Is there even a point? Well, as a techie and a good Samaritan, I bought both, and I'm going to hopefully help you guys decide which one to get. But before we get into my cheeky comparison, it's important to note that the iPad Air is only available in one size, which is the 10.9 inches. But if you want the iPad Pro, it comes in two sizes, the 11 inch and the 12.9 inch. So obviously if you want a big iPad, you don't really have much of a choice, and this comparison is probably not for you. So I'm going to be comparing the 10.9 inch iPad Air and the 11 inch iPad Pro. So I'm going to be dividing this video up into price, aesthetics, camera, biometrics, note taking, other comparisons, and finally the conclusion. As always, I will timestamp the video, and if you guys just want a simple answer, then feel free to jump to the conclusion. Don't worry, I won't judge. That's why I timestamp it for you guys. I don't want to waste your time. But yeah, just feel free to do that. And if you guys want a more in-depth explanation, then obviously watch the entire video where I go into depth about my reasoning behind the conclusion. So yeah, without further ado, let's jump straight into the video. Let's start with the pricing. The iPad Pro with 128 gigs of storage comes in at £769 or $799 and goes up all the way to £1,269 or $1,299 for a 1TB model. Whereas the iPad Air with 64 gigs of storage comes in at £579 or $599 and goes up all the way to £729 or $749 for a 256GB model. Now obviously if you need more than 256 gigs of storage, then the iPad Air isn't for you. Now how much storage you need is a topic for another video, but also keep in mind that I haven't included student pricing here, so you can expect a price reduction of about 5% if you go with student pricing. But all in all, the price difference between the two will be about £200 or dollars. Moving on to the aesthetics. So as you can see, both devices have the same unibody construction. The bezels are slightly thicker on the iPad Air, but not really noticeable too much. They're small enough to be relevant in 2020, but big enough to, get a good grip so your fingers don't hit the display. The weight is about the same in both devices, with a few grams here and there, not really noticeable. The screen resolution and the screen quality are about the same as well. Again, not much difference, but the iPad Pro does get a bit brighter, which will obviously help when used outdoors. The iPad Pro has a ProMotion display, which means that the screen refresh rate is 120Hz. For those of you guys that don't know what that means, basically every screen you see in your life refreshes itself a certain number of times per second, and the more it refreshes itself, the more faster, lag-free, less jittery and just smoother experience that you have. So most monitors, TVs, iPhones, they refresh at 60Hz, 60 times per second, and the iPad Pro doubles this to 120Hz, and you don't really know what you're missing out on until you see it. I try to replicate it on camera, but it's just not visible on camera. You need to see it with your naked eye to notice a difference. And again, for someone who hasn't seen it, it's not much of a big difference. If you're going for an iPhone to that, you won't notice much of a difference. But if you're going the other way around, so if you're downgrading from an iPad Pro to an iPad Air, or if you're going from a higher refresh display on an Android phone down to an iPad Air, it's going to be very noticeable, and things are just going to be a bit more clunky to use and not very smooth. So that's obviously something you should take into account. Not a big deal if you haven't experienced it, but if you have, then just keep that in mind. Finally, in terms of colours, the iPad Air comes in a lot more colours to express yourselves in. So it comes in blue, pink, green, grey, silver, whereas the iPad Pro only gets you a silver or a grey. Moving on to cameras. A lot of people say, who cares about cameras on an iPad? But to be honest, I think they're used for a multitude of different things, like document scanning, lectures, meetings, FaceTimes, to name a few. So there are definitely use case scenarios, and both of these iPads come with the same actual camera, which is good enough for an iPad. But the iPad Pro takes it to another level and includes an ultra wide and a LiDAR camera. So the ultra wide camera basically allows you to capture more in the frame, and the LiDAR camera is basically Apple terminology for a depth camera, which is used for augmented reality, and it's used to scan your surroundings in 3D. Probably not explaining this very well. It allows you to like sort of map your surroundings, say how far things are from each other. No, probably lost you. Okay, basically my point is it doesn't really matter. You don't need it. Apple basically added these cameras. Yes, we improved the iPad Pro. We added a camera, 2 cameras even. The main camera is the most important one. Both of these are just little bonuses which you'll maybe use in a very small case scenario, but for most people, and especially for an iPad, it's really not necessary. Like, the main camera is fine, and therefore I don't think that the camera should influence your decision as to what iPad to buy. By the way, if you're enjoying the video so far, make sure you drop a like down below and comment that you're enjoying the video. It really helps my channel out with the YouTube algorithm and promotes it so other people can see. Thank you. Moving on to biometrics, basically how you log onto your iPad. The new iPad Air doesn't actually have Face ID. It comes with Touch ID in the power button. Having Face ID means that by default there are higher quality sensors which allow for better camera shots, better portrait modes, FaceTiming, emojis, all that other kind of nonsense. But then again, it begs the question, like, does it even matter? Having all this stuff in an iPad, like, do you even care? And to be honest, most likely you don't. On the other hand, it's very easy to make the argument that because of COVID, like, will I even use Face ID? It doesn't even matter. But then you've got to think about it this way. You're going to be using your iPad for what, 5 years, 6 years? So hopefully COVID isn't going to last that long, and you're going to be using your iPad at home or in scenarios where you're not going to be wearing a mask. So in the end, it really doesn't matter. In my experience, Face ID has been faster to unlock than Touch ID, but then again, it's only a few seconds longer. Both are fine, both work great for me, and yeah, it's all personal preference in the end. The note-taking comparison. I thought I'll squeeze in a small note-taking comparison section here for the students out there. Basically, it's the same. Like, there's no real difference, you know, you're not going to notice anything. I thought I'll save you the whole side-by-side video comparison thing, where you're like, oh yeah, this was a bit faster than that, oh yeah, one here, you know, where I slow it down 100 times. But again, realistically, to the naked eye, there's no real difference. You know, you might notice something if you're downgrading from the iPad Pro to the iPad Air, and that's simply because of the 120Hz refresh rate. You might notice a small difference, but yeah, realistically, it doesn't matter, and it really shouldn't influence which iPad you should get. Now I'm going to go over some other comparisons. The iPad Air comes with an A14 chip, whereas the iPad Pro comes with an A12Z chip. The iPad Air has a higher number, and you're probably wondering, wait, that doesn't make any sense. Yes, it doesn't. The iPad Air has 4GB of RAM, whereas the iPad Pro comes with 6GB of RAM. For the average consumer and day-to-day use, you're not going to notice much of a difference. It's all going to be fine. You know, it's going to run smoothly. But I have the old iPad Pro, the 2018 model, and that came with 4GB of RAM. And I noticed that apps often closed in the background, and I had to reopen them, which just took a bit longer and was a bit, you know, a bit more tedious. And also when I did some video editing, yes, I edit on my iPad a fair amount. When I added a lot of files, the video would start to slow down. So maybe what I would say is, if you're video editing or photo editing professionally, more than your simple 1 or 2, you know, minor edits for Instagram, but like properly doing it, or if you like to multitask a lot, then maybe shy away from the iPad Air, as the extra 2GB of RAM will really help in that regard. The iPad Pro also comes with a quad speaker setup, which means it has 4 speakers. It's obviously nicer to hear. The iPad Air has a stereo speaker set, which means it has 2 speakers. Unless you're an audiophile who likes to listen to music a lot on their iPad, again, it really shouldn't make a difference as to what you should get. You know, it's nice to have music, as long as it's a certain category. Anything above that, it's just, you know, bonus. It doesn't really make a difference. The conclusion. Okay, so I'm going to make this really easy for you guys. I'm going to list 7 categories, and if you fit into any of these, then you should get the iPad Pro. So number 1, you want more than 256 gigs of storage, as the iPad Air maxes out at that. whereas the iPad Pro goes up all the way to 1 terabyte. Number 2, you want Face ID, as Touch ID is for peasants. Number 3, you want that ProMotion display, the 120 screen refresh rate, you know, the fast, slick experience that you guys want. Number 4, you want the ultra wide or the depth camera. Number 5, you want a big iPad, as I said at the start of the video. Number 6, you video edit or photo edit professionally, more than your average, 1 or 2, Instagram edits. And number 7, you want the best of the best. You got the spare cash and you just want to blow it. Otherwise, I think the best iPad for most people in 2020 is the iPad Air, full stop. Or period, for you Americans out there. I see you've been watching my tech videos. I've been seeing this. That's been it for the video, and I'm out.